and you have seen monoculture, and you have seen the impact of it in agriculture in general, not just coffee, it's very hurtful. It's very damaging. And when you see that coffee is grown in a way that mirrors nature, that coffee is healthier.
Greetings, coffee lovers from around the world. You are now watching the Health First Coffee Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, along with my co-host, Ildi Revi, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. On this program, we explore the incredibly complex relationship between coffee and human health. And on today's show, we're featuring a man who has cemented himself at the center of the world of healthy coffee and is single-handedly changing the way that people produce coffee for the better. We're going to cover a lot of ground on today's show, including health science, coffee economics, regenerative agriculture, and more. Our guest today has spent the past 2 decades driving innovation across the entire coffee production chain, and his work with Purity Coffee has ultimately culminated in the creation of the circular health coffee category. Joining us today from Purity Coffee and many more exciting projects, Ricardo Pereira is with us. What's up, Ricardo?
Hey, Jordan, thank you so much for having me in the program. It's been a long time coming, and I'm super excited to be here with you and Ildi as well, someone that I've known for over 2 decades as well in the industry, somebody that I look up to. And for me to be here, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
I cannot wait to dig into this conversation. For the first-time listeners, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your coffee journey and what ultimately led you to the intersection of coffee and health.
Absolutely. So, been in coffee for almost 2 decades now. I'm from Brazil originally, so from the Alta Mogiana region. And my background is supply chain. In Brazil back then in 2007, 2008, Brazil was becoming really popular in the US. Everywhere you went, there was Brazil everywhere. I think that was around that time was when Brazil got selected for the World Cup and for the Olympics. And that was the first time the Olympics was held in South America. It was in Rio in 2016. But then Brazil was, everywhere. So I'm like, I think you should take advantage of this. And what are the products from Brazil that I could potentially work with and bring to the US? And then coffee was one of them. I realized very quickly that the best way of doing that would be partnering with the farmers that I knew back, in my region to import raw coffee beans. So that was back in 2008. I kind of grew that business very healthily for 4 years. And then I also start forging relationships in other producing countries, not just Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, Ethiopia, Sumatra, and so forth. And little by little, started working with other smaller importers, focus on those different countries, and then almost created an informal cooperative of sorts that we would be helping each other kind of grow our businesses and work with the farmers in the regions we came from. End of 2012, I sold that company to a larger company in the green coffee trading world. And then end of 2023, that's when I really got into that crossroads between coffee and health. And it was a time of my life that I wanted to do something that created a bigger impact, right? And would leave a legacy. And of course, I've knew Purity from the concept phase when Andrew drove to visit me in 2014, 2015, and talked to me about this idea of Purity. And I thought it was a genius idea. At the time, I hadn't heard anybody talk about coffee that way. And also to understand how important that was for Andrew because of Amber and what Andrew wanted to do. And those conversations started to continue, right? Andrew visited for the first time, 2014, 2015. I said, listen, I can potentially help you find the coffees you need for this project of yours. I introduced Yildi to Andrew back in the days as well, which was something amazing. And then when I decided that I wanted to do something more meaningful and that would be impacting people's lives when they drank it, and not only the people drinking it, but also the people producing or growing those beautiful coffees, I came to Purity first and said, listen, I am leaving my current role and I wanted to let you guys know first. And immediately, Yudi and Andrew set up a call and a meeting and talked to me and said, you need to come to Purity. You need to come and be part of what we're doing. And I'm like, say no more. And then now, fast forward to January 2024, when when I became part of the team, and see how well received and the impact that Purity was creating in the world, and was a no brainer for me. I really wanted to be part of this because I wanted to leave a legacy and leave a mark. And I believe Purity is the company and is the place that I can actually contribute to leave that mark and leave a legacy behind.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. Taking your work to the next level and making it more meaningful, more impactful. And there's no better way to do that when it comes to coffee than health.
That's
Focusing
right.
on health is a whole different intention. Why does healthy coffee start on the farm? You work very closely with producers specifically. And so I'd love to talk about obviously farming practices, but beyond that, economic stability, deep
Mhm.
relationships with the farmer. Why are those things so intrinsically linked to producing a healthy cup of coffee?
Absolutely. It starts right there with the people at origin, the people that are actually producing and growing this beautiful coffee. If the coffee is not honoring the land, if the coffee is not honoring the way it's grown, is not honoring the people and the planet, man, we are going to face some severe issues in the future because the population in the world, a larger amount of people are drinking coffee, right? And if we don't actually look for the future and tomorrow maybe there won't be enough coffee or really great coffee for people to drink, right? When you think about why it starts in the farm level and you have seen monoculture and you have seen the impact of it in agriculture in general, not just coffee, it's very hurtful. It's very damaging. And when you see that coffee is grown in a way that mirrors nature, that coffee is healthier. And by being healthier, mirroring nature, it is a better cup of coffee for people to drink it at the end of the day. And of course, you can see what monoculture and you can see how farming in a way that doesn't honor the land, the earth, the people, and the planet. When it's not done that way, how damaging that can be, right? If people don't really care about the land, the people, the planet, forget about it. This is not going to work for the whole betterment of the world and the coffee industry in general. And I feel like even the bigger companies are wired now to regenerative ag and then trying to tap in and invest and provide means for coffee to be grown in a different way
Mhm.
because they already understand that if they don't take part on this, we are going to see in the next 50 years something really dramatic in coffee production and in the coffee industry in general.
I think that's exactly right. And we could talk about regenerative agriculture and, compost and mycorrhizal fungi and all that till the cows come home. But until we change the way that coffee is exchanged, it's like you said, there's the
Correct.
idealistic side and then there's where the rubber meets the road.
That's right.
And Ricardo, as a coffee consumer, I don't mind paying a little bit extra at the cup. What I can't abide by is not having access to coffee. That's what consumers need to understand here. 10
Mhm.
cents at the cup, 20 cents at the cup, or even more. Listen, I need my coffee. That's the important thing. So, can we talk about that? The way that coffee is exchanged
Mhm.
traditionally, and then how you do it a little bit different in your work?
Yeah, so I feel like we can talk all day long about farming and farming practices, but that without the economics, it's almost dead in the water from the beginning, right? And I like to say farmers are the people with the power of product because they're the ones growing it, and we have companies like Purity and roasteries and coffee shops out there that they are the people with the power of demand, right? If we can not have the people with power of product and people with power of demand to really have this a deeper relationship and understanding of not just the farming practices, but the economics that goes with it, then there is no solid relationship that's going to be built for the future. So yes, the economics of it is very important. When the inception of the New York sea market for the coffee market, the creation of it had a very solid meaning and was well intended. But that was how many decades ago, right? We can continue to do business and coffee and commodities in general. We can continue to do business the same way that was intended 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, right? But if you see the changes that the world have had since COVID to 2026 to now to today, we have never experienced that before. And why do we experience that now? And now, why those events are so more impactful now than ever before is because we have technology. We are a globalized world, and people know in Bangladesh what's happening right now in the U.S. and vice versa. And we are interconnected. We're global citizens. We're global people. Something that just happened this week in Colombia with the earthquake is impacting how many people here in the U.S. So we can continue to do business when it comes to coffee and the exchange like we did decades ago, not even like we did 10 years ago. And I know that the exchange, has a purpose and serves its purpose for a long time, but it's time for us to think outside that system because it's a broken system, right? We think about how intermediary companies use that for their own benefit and gain for decades, but now they have been suffering for the last several years with, for example, market backwardation, market inversion, and the futures are not actually paying you; they're charging from you, and you're losing millions and millions of dollars in hope that this market is going to be inverted again. But why use a system that is broken when we can actually have a direct relationship with who is producing and who has the demand, and the intermediaries operating as a facilitator of the trade as opposed to be the ones controlling the trade, right? That's where the sustainability of the coffee industry lies. If we all work together, people with the power of demand, people with the power of product, people with the power of service, and I call intermediaries people with the power of service because they do have a very important role in the supply chain, which is not controlling it, it is facilitating. So the way that Purity approaches this is that we, Purity, the company with the power of demand, we go directly to our producing partners that has the power of product, and we have a very honest, deeper conversation about what is important to them and also what is important to us. And of course, the economics of that has to follow, right? We have to understand what we can do for them so they can continue to produce the coffee at the highest level that we need so we can continue to actually supply these coffees to the people that believe in purity, that buys purity coffee and wants to continue to buy purity coffee because that is impacting their health, right? So we have to think outside the New York exchange market, the C market, for buying and selling coffee, or we're going to be trapped in this system that is broken and that has hurt a lot of people. One day is benefiting the producer, the next day is benefiting intermediaries and roasters, and tomorrow who's going to be the one benefiting from it? We don't know, right? It's a gamble. It's gambling. It's a gamble with something that we can have a little bit more certainty in this very uncertain time. One thing we know, there is coffee being produced. One thing we know, there's coffee being consumed. If we know that those two things are happening, anything in between, we can actually come to an agreement. But we cannot use anymore a system that is broken as the base for that economic relationship to happen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. One thing that strikes me as we talk about this, Ricardo, is you talk about the New York exchange of coffee and the commoditization of coffee and how that opens it up to, trading futures and gambling, as you said, and speculation and all this stuff. But coffee's not like gold, 999 fine gold. This is the product. It's not even really like sugar or wheat.
Yep.
It's you guys approach it for what it is, which is a food medicine, a plant medicine. The commodities market doesn't approach it like that. So I agree with what you're saying. The system does not fit the product. And it's not like other commodities. Like I said, 999 fine silver. I know what that is when I'm gambling on it. Coffee isn't like that. It doesn't work like that, right?
No, it's exactly right. You know, you have, cocoa functions one way, milk function another way. You know, currency is a different way. Of course, there's some things that some events or some things that happen that impact all the commodities, right, or all the products. But they are not the same. They are not all the same, right? And then when it comes to what is important to purity, it's even more unique, right? It's not the same. So why use a system that is broken, a system that is antiquated, and a system that doesn't fit the mode for how we actually and what is important to us, right? As purity coffee, why use a system like that? And by the way, we don't force anybody. We don't shovel down anybody's throat what they need to do as coffee growers because we are not coffee producers. And it's a mistake if roasters believe that they can do the job, the producer's job better than they can when it comes to the economics of it. Is it simple? No, it's not simple because we're talking about inflation. We're talking about acts of God or natural disasters. We're talking about currency exchanges. Like one of the biggest things right now, for example, when we talk, a lot of our coffees. We buy a good volume of coffees coming from Colombia, for example. Then in the last 3 to 6 months, the exchange rate for Colombia, the dollar got devaluated over 37%.
Yeah.
So if I bought coffee last year or before this devaluation of the currency at certain amount, and I'm going to pay the same price now, I'm doing the producer is making way less money than they were last year. But also as a company, I cannot just increase the price 37% because I also have a responsibility to my consumers that I can't just pass on that 37%. And as a business, I also need to be in a way that I can make a profit. Otherwise, I won't be here for the long run either. So it's a juggling act. It is finding balance.
It's well said. And it's like you said, creating a new system. It's about breaking that wheel and redefining the exchange of coffee. I love working on the farming side, and that's well and good, but we need to redefine the exchange and the definition of health and quality when it comes to coffee. Because traditionally it's been price and taste, right?
Mhm.
And as
Yep.
consumers, that's all people have really concerned themselves with. And because of that, we see a wide variety of product. There's some really high quality coffees out there, and there's also some really crappy quality coffee. I'm sure you
Mhm.
know as well as anybody.
Mhm.
And the problem with that really low cost coffee is it comes with hidden
Mhm.
costs for the planet and also hidden costs for our health. Can you talk about the other side of this industry, which is that commoditized coffee?
Can I just step in here a second and say that specialty coffee, first of all, the definition is changing. It's a lot of things changing in the industry. Specialty coffee, if we just say 30%, and that's a big number, it's probably closer to 20%. Some people even say 15%. But even if we granted 30% of coffee is specialty, that means 70% of coffee, the vast majority of coffee produced in the world, is not specialty grade, meaning it's commercial coffee.
I think with the new definition, I think that number also would be different. I feel like, in all honesty, when you think about mass production, right, and volumes and volumes and volumes of coffee, it's a very funny game, right? So when you see coffee prices in the levels that we have seen the last several years, what do you think that coffee farmers will do? They will find more land, or they are going to get certain parts of there's no coffee being planted, and they're going to plant more coffee. right?
Increased production.
So
Yeah.
increase production. So then when you do that, fast forward to 3, 4, 5 years later, then you have more production, right? For example, let's take a country like Brazil, and I'm from Brazil. Brazil produces one third of the world's coffee production, right? 70 something million bags of coffee a year this year, right? But then, like, say, lower quality is not only tied to agricultural practices, it can also happen when you have the weather pattern, for example, out of whack.
Mhm.
And I'll explain this to you in this way. I was just in Brazil and I drove over 1,000 miles in a week, and I only visited two major growing regions. Right? What happened? What has been happening in Brazil for the last several weeks during the harvest time, which is actually historically known as the dry season? We have had rains in some areas. 40% of the cherries ready to be harvested fell to the ground because of the heavy rains. That is going to impact the quality, and that's going to make that coffee become a low grade. Did the producer do anything wrong? Had nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
Now, I'm saying this is one example. Do a lot of producers produce coffee in a massive amount of way because they need to decrease their cost of operations and increase their margins? Absolutely. Do they use chemicals that they shouldn't be using? Absolutely. Do they do mechanized harvest? Yes, because if they don't do it that way, they cannot even harvest. I'm saying this because, yes, I feel like there's a lot of bad players out there that they don't care about anything else, and they just want to produce volume and decrease their costs and make big margins. But I also believe that there's a lot of people with great intention wanting to do the right thing, and for lack of knowledge or resources, they cannot do it. And why I'm talking so much about Brazil, not because I'm Brazilian. I'm talking so much about Brazil because Brazil is such an impactful country when it comes to buying and selling, right? And the way that they do things. But did you know that in Brazil, you have probably one of the largest amount of coffee farmers trying to figure it out how they can grow coffee utilizing regenerative ag practices. Now, Brazil is the villain in many things. I believe Brazil is the country that can also teach a lot of other producing countries how to be better in terms of their coffee production. But imagine a country like Brazil that produces one third of the global production. When these people, and if they start really changing the way that they approach agriculture and the way that they produce coffee, can you imagine the impact that we're going to have for the future? And that may mean that they need to realize that they need to produce less. That may mean that they need to revisit and say, I don't need to plant another area of coffee. Maybe I use that to plant cocoa. Maybe I plant a different crop. Maybe I grow some sort of a vegetable or whatever it is, right? Instead of producing coffee, maybe I plant bananas. There's going to be one point in time that people are going to realize that they need to diversify and they cannot heavily rely in just one crop. And then I think things will kind of like sort it out. But it's baby steps, and we can't expect that we're going to change the way people do things today overnight. We can't. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. But we are seeing, and people are becoming more aware of the impact of climate. They are becoming more aware the impact that the way that agriculture has been done for the last several decades is not helpful. It's harmful. That they need to change. They cannot continue to do things the same way. So it is happening. I see a movement happening. Are we going to be here 5 years from now talking about this and having things being done differently? Absolutely, I believe so. Right, but we have to take one day at a time. So going back to low grades,
Mm.
right now, it is not advantageous for people to really grow low grade. It's not. The price is high. There's an old school way of thinking, which okay, price is high. I don't need to do anything. I'm just going to throw that chemical. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do that, and fine. Look at, the flip side, coffee roasting companies and coffee companies that are selling coffee to direct to consumer, right? There is no cheap coffee in the market right now. There is no cheap coffee right now.
Right.
So if they, I'm still going to buy low grade, but the difference from a low grade to a better premium or a traditional coffee is like, what, 5 cents per pound? Is 10 cents per pound, maybe. But there's a really good layer of, the producers that are really taking advantage of the high prices, right? And then using that as an investment. Percentage wise, I don't know how to precisely tell you, but I have this sentiment there's a bigger movement of people wanting to really do, better for the future. And I feel like in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of people creating a better positive impact in how they grow coffee. And that is, regardless of organic, regenerative, and so forth. Now, one thing that I wanted to point out here, did you know that Nespresso has made a commitment by 2030 to be using 100% of regenerative agriculture certified coffees for their coffee program?
I did not know that.
They are investing a lot of money in Brazil and other producing countries just to support that movement. Well, these guys know they have resources that a lot of other companies don't. And why do you think that they're doing that? So see what I'm trying to say here? That we see a shift, we see a movement happening, right? It's hard to precise by percentage, by lower grades or high grades, or how this is impacting. But when you look at what is the positive or the positive impact that these decisions made by large companies and smaller companies, what is the impact that this is going to have in the world? I feel like we are trending in the positive, going towards the positive side of things as opposed to the negative of things.
That's it for today's show, part 1 in a multi-part series featuring Ricardo Pereira. So stay tuned. Part 2 will be coming at you in just 2 short weeks. And until then, make sure you're subscribed to the show, hit like, hit share. We love when you share the Health First Coffee Podcast with a coffee lover. And if you want to try the coffee that was the culmination of all of Ricardo's work, visit puritycoffee.com and use code HEALTHY so that they know that we sent you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Health First Coffee Podcast.